Welcome to the Big Fellas Podcast, where we chop it up about all things past, present, and future about the game of basketball. Where facts, stats, and context reign supreme.
That is blasphemous!
Sometimes it gets crazy, but we always keep it real. Get ready to learn from players, coaches, and fans from all levels of the game and see the court in a brand new way. And now, fresh off the sidelines, here's your host, John Hartofilis.
What it do, fellas, and welcome to the Big Fellas Podcast. I'm your host, John Hartofilis, coming to you from New York City, the mecca of basketball. Today, I'm super excited to have on Brandon Steiner. Brandon and I were connected through my close friend, Jesse K, and the Making Lemonade Fund, and Brandon has been a huge mentor to me over the past few weeks. Brandon is the founder of Steiner Sports, the world-renowned sports marketing and memorabilia company, the CEO of the Steiner Agency, and the CEO of Collectiblexchange. Brandon is the face of sports memorabilia, and in this episode, he gives us fantastic advice about what it takes to succeed, not just in the sports industry, but in life. You don't want to miss out on the absolute gold that Brandon shared with me during our conversation. We spoke extensively off-air and passionately jumped right into it, so get ready to jump right in.
Steal some of these nuggets for your team, man, because this is a critical time, by the way, if you're coaching your team, to make sure you're in contact with them, because these kids will do nothing. You know, oh, we can't practice, oh, we can't play. I'm like, you can do a lot of things at home. And right now is a time when they can get better. Nobody gets better during the season anyway. You only get better during the summer. And that's what you got to tell your kids. Like, you're coming back the same player I saw before, I'm going to cut you. You better come back, play, be in better shape of your life. Just saying. I love that coaching shit. I miss coaching basketball, man. I miss it. I got to get back onto the court. I got to get back into it. I got to find a team that could do some coaching. I love it. Kids are great, man. They're just great. All right, you ready?
Sure. So first thing I want to ask you about was a story I've heard you reference multiple times in various interviews and blog posts that's really stood out to me. It's a story about when you were working in your 20s at the Hyatt Hotel and you were thinking outside the box to try to get the promotion you were looking for by using the yes or yes theory. And you did this by asking people if they wanted coffee or orange juice instead of just asking if they wanted coffee. I think that's great advice that our listeners can benefit from, and I want to know what you thought about that.
Well, I think if I'm your age, and certainly if I'm in high school or college, I definitely need the yes or yes theory. You know, it starts with, you never want to ask a girl out and ask her if they want to go out with you. I mean, that's just a stupid question. You want to offer two alternatives that can only be a yes. So do you want to have a cup of coffee with me, or would you like to go to movies? You always want to ask a yes question. I think when you're coaching somebody or when you're trying to sell somebody something, your always best bet is to ask them a question where both answers are yes. So if I say to you, would you like to go do an interview tomorrow and the next day, or would you like to just do another interview? It's different. So, it's really about taking control of the question. I think the out of the box part of that is that I think that it doesn't, and I really should start the interview with this, and then I should say, look, it doesn't really matter where you're at. It doesn't. It doesn't matter where you're at. What matters is what you're willing to accept. And I think that for me, I was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I just gotten promoted, and I was not happy. It's not what I wanted to do at 21 years old. So I wasn't willing to accept it. So the only thing I could do is quit, which I wasn't going to do because that was my dream job, or figure out how to get promoted. And when you just get highly hostile about the fact of where you're at and where you don't want to accept it, only then good things happen. And the problem is we just don't get hostile often enough. When you think about times when your back's been against the wall, somebody's challenging you, somebody's got a knife at your throat, that's the hostile where all of a sudden you're looking at every possibility of what you could do to protect yourself. It's the same thing in business. Like, you have to be hostile and constantly looking at every edge. So as I'm walking down the hallway, I see this orange juice machine. That's how the orange juice coffee story got started. I'm like, I have to get promoted. I'm not willing to accept this. I'm 21. I do not want to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And hopefully the restaurant opens. And that's just not how I saw myself at 21. Because, I'm out till 3 in the morning. I'm not going to lie. I mean, you're going out. I don't want to get up at 3. I don't want to get up at 5 in the morning. So I'm like, I'm looking at everything. I'm like a lion in the jungle. I'm looking. attacking, trying to find my way to a promotion. That was the fourth idea I came up with. The other three failed. You know, I tried doing a wine display, but you can't sell wine in a coffee shop. But finally, the orange juice. The fresh squeezed orange juice. The corporate person, when I offered them coffee, orange juice, it was a yes, yes. My goal was to raise the average check, get people to spend more money in my restaurant. So the thing is, if you're unhappy, that's okay. When you get into high level of non-acceptance, like, I'm not going to tolerate sitting on this bench. I want to play, and I'm going to do everything I can to make that coach put me in. Only then can you advance yourself to a level where you're going to make it very difficult for your coach not to put you in. Just trying hard and playing hard, or just sulking, because you get the poor little ultimate me. I call it the plum effect. Poor little ultimate me. Well, I'm not playing. I'm like, hey, don't be a plum. At the end of the day, get hostile. And at the end of the day, be somebody who's not willing to accept where you're at. And then, only then, your automatic instinct is, well, what am I going to do about it? And then all of a sudden it comes into the, well, I'm going to do whatever it takes. And that's how you advance. Doesn't matter where you're at. It's 5 a.m, man. That's like being in prison at 20 years old, having to wake up every morning that hour. And I wasn't going to tolerate it. So I did something about it. And finally, the orange juice machine found me. So I ask all you people out there, you know, if you're in a situation you're unhappy about, are you putting up with it, or you won't accept it? Because you're worse than the situation you're in if you want to accept it. Just saying.
That's fantastic advice. And it actually leads me right into my next question, which was, so when you joined the Making Lemonade Zoom, you really stressed the importance of accountability and how important of a quality it is to become successful. And that's something I've been stressing to my players almost every single time we're in the locker room in the meeting was, don't blame your shoes, don't blame the ref. Realize that if you put your best effort in, the result is entirely up to you, knowing that I'm in control of all the good and the bad things that happen to me.
And just because something bad happens doesn't mean that you did bad. Sometimes things don't roll. Life is not always perfect. But I think the accountability is to know when you go into a situation that you are confident in your ability, you're confident in God, and you have done everything you can to prepare. Sometimes the ball isn't going to bounce perfectly, but you know after you lose and don't hit that shot, you did everything you could do. I asked Mariano Rivera about the 2001 World Series. I try to remind him all the time about it, actually, because he screwed up the game. So, you know, I want to punish him for that, you know, as a friend, and I love ribbing him about that. But, you know, he says, listen, Brandon, I did everything I could. I know that didn't end the way I wanted it to, but I have no regrets. I played, I prepared. It's just they were better than me that day. And that's a big difference than you going to say, you know, if I would have just taken a few hundred more shots, or if I would have maybe done a little more research on the customer that I was trying to sell. You know, you don't want to go into a situation where you're not completely prepared and not confident in your ability. Because when you are and you have faith and you have confidence in God, more than likely good things are going to happen. Even though the result may not be perfect, but you know good things are going to happen because you did everything you could. You left it all out there.
Nothing's more important than leaving it all on the floor. That's a perfect example of a professional athlete that everyone would kind of think of another reason as to, oh, this is why this meltdown happened. But he's actually taking it on to himself. You know what? I did everything I possibly could, and it just didn't work out. This is perfect. This is fantastic advice. So the next thing I wanted to ask you about was, and I know my players are going to smile when I say this, but accountability is one thing I stressed a fair amount. But I don't think there was a single time I didn't say this in the locker room was the quote, play where your feet are. Whether it's when you're in a game, if the ball gets tipped and you're thinking about the final score, you're in the future. And if you miss a shot and you're thinking about the fact that you just missed that shot and you're thinking about in the past, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the highest level of competitiveness it should happen in practice and in preparation. I always say pop, and that's not shoot. Pop is progress on process. If you're not improving your process, if you're not looking to get better. I remember going into the locker room when Kobe Bryant dropped his 63 and he met Mariano. I was at the game with Mariano, and all he wanted to know about Mariano's process. If there's he just dropped 63 in the Garden. At that time was the most amount ever scored. And all he wanted to know is how Mariano prepared himself for so many big games and did so well that this was something maybe he can incorporate in his process. So if you're not progressing on your process, that's where your intensity and competitive spirit needs to go. You need to find the people that are doing what you're doing better than you and why they're doing it better than you and what they're doing better than you, so you can incorporate that into your process. If you're playing the score ever, I should never be able to watch when you play and know what the score is, whether you're up or down. You don't want a surgeon coming in and operating on you and just say, well, I had 99%. I was 99% there. Sorry, I left the scalpel in your lung. You did 99 things right and one thing wrong. Like, you have to be concentrating on everything you do to be a consummate pro. And that should be your focus. If you're worrying about the score, when you go to a Yankee game, you never could tell the score when you're watching Derek Jeter. Whether he was 4 for 4, 5 for 5, 0 for 3, same approach, same focus, same level of intensity. And that's what you want. Consistency over time equals credibility. People that can walk on a court, you're not sure if it's the beginning of the game, end of the game, scores up 10, down 10, it doesn't matter. The Yankees were losing 11-3 one night. My son's like, "Dad, let's go home. It's the seventh inning. Never going to catch up." Like, no, now I want to see who's playing. I want to see who's going to get up the bat or just wants to get home. I want to see who's just playing the game because they love the game. And they're going to look at every at-bat. They're going to make every play regardless of the score. And that's how you can tell your real players is, at the end of a practice, in a game that maybe you're winning by a lot, losing a lot, and you see the intensity level, because there should be no variation. And I always say there's no such thing as a big game. You should always be consistently going at it, trying to get better, and making sure that you're punishing your competitor for getting on the field or court with you. And if I do that in the last minute of a game, first minute of a game, I'm still want to make sure that competitor knows they ran into the wrong player on this particular day.
Brandon, I've heard you say many times that you believe the present day is a great time to be an entrepreneur. How did you start doing that as a young kid in Brooklyn during a time where being an entrepreneur wasn't exactly a buzzword? And how should people, young people especially in the present day, use that as inspiration to cut out their excuses and chase their goals and dreams right now?
I think, first of all, I was put in an entrepreneurial environment more because, not by choice. So, and I learned that having your back against the wall, everything else seems kind of boring. When you're down 4 with a couple minutes left, like, that's exciting. You can go catch up, and, every second, every tick, every possession becomes important. Question is, can you play the whole game that way? But when you come into entrepreneurism, I think what's an important lesson is that you don't have to be into business entrepreneurism. I think it's more of a mindset about everything, whether it's the way you decorate your room, even an entrepreneur, the way you play your game. You're going to play your game the way everyone else does. You're going to do something a little bit unique and different about your game. My entrepreneurial spirit, it was with everything I did, not just business. So yes, I was a little bit of an odd kid, but I think what's important for me and what I take away is that entrepreneurism is about, and the most important thing is to be an expert and to be the absolute best and know who the best is, so you know what you're competing against when you decide what you want to do. So if you're going to be a high school basketball player, who is the best high school basketball player in the country? Who's the best one in your region? Who's the best kid in your league? And you understand what it's going to take to become the best. To do anything entrepreneurial, you need to understand what the market is presenting itself, who you're competing against, and then only then can you figure out what's missing. So when you understand what the market is, whatever it may be, whether there's a newsletter or there's a newspaper missing or a TV show that's missing, there's so many entrepreneurs in TV production these days, or doctors that are entrepreneurs that have figured out new ways to get cured, or things you could wear for your knee or for your ankle. Like, entrepreneurship goes wide and far. It's a mindset, and you must understand the market that you're looking at and find everything there is about that market, because then you can only figure out what's missing. The second ingredient is you need to be able to take risks, because sometimes your idea, it just doesn't work. You thought about something, you did it, you researched it, and then it didn't work. And then the third part is you have to have leadership, because you're doing something that's completely different, whether it's a workout or a certain way to cook something or whatever it is. And, something, you have to be able to lead people to do something that no one else has done. So most of them aren't going to believe you. Like, I'm doing my Collectiblexchange now. Nobody believes me that this is going to work. I have to sell these people every day why this is a good idea, why this is going to work. So you have to have those leadership skills to be able to sell it in. And that's the real beauty of being a really great coach and a really good captain on a team, is you're trying to think of different innovative ways based on the circumstances in a game. That's why I love business and sports. You're looking at the circumstances. You understand your IQ of a basketball game is high. You've studied film. You've studied these things. And then you're looking for the gap. You're looking for the hole because you understand the circumstances. You're trying to figure out what's the what else. And you want to take a risk to attack that what else. And then the key thing on the coaching and the leadership is I'm going to lead my team to go into that gap and to exploit that gap. It's the same thing in business. We're going to punish this team because they're not that big down low. So everybody's going to crash the boards. And we're going to keep getting rebounds and everything. And the way we're going to do it is this. I know that's different than what we've been doing. So that's entrepreneurism in a small way, So understanding the market, understanding that, there's risk involved, and understanding the leadership role you have to take to get that execution. I always say execution beats strategy for breakfast. You can practice all the plays you want. Got to execute though. So execution beats strategy for lunch and breakfast every day. So you got to make sure that your players not only understand the plays and believe in the plays that you're trying to implement into a game, but they can execute them. And the way you get somebody to execute something is to ask them if they agree with this, what you're asking them to do, and they understand what you're asking them to do. Because you could show somebody something all day, but if they don't agree and say, I agree and understand, they think, this place is never going to work. I don't want to do this. This idea is never going to work. Brand, that's a stupid idea. And I have plenty of employees. So if you ever work for me, I always say, do you agree? Do you agree with what I'm just saying? And do you understand? Because if they don't, I'm going to say, okay, let me re-explain it then. Because if a player doesn't agree and understand, it's going to be hard for them to execute the way you want them to. And that's why plays don't work. And that's why certain business ideas don't work. Because the players didn't agree. And they didn't really understand what the hell you were talking about, because entrepreneurs are talking one language and the normal people they're talking another language. And your ability to explain that and break it down so everybody understands and agrees is really important. You're talking to some kid and say, listen, can you attend free throws in a row? Your coach, I can't attend free throws in a row. Why? Why can't you? It's free. There's nobody guarding you. You can't attend free throws? No. Let me ask you a question. If I take a gun out, put it in your head, and if you don't hit 10 in a row, I kill you, then there's a good chance you get 10 in a row? Of course. If you concentrated and your life was dependent on it, of course. And what I say about that is obviously you're dramatizing with the gun, but the point is that you have to create pressure situation for your team. You have to create a hostile environment, because at the end, that's where you'll find yourself in business and in a game. You'll find yourself in very unusual, uncomfortable circumstances. And that's really the only thing you can practice for. So if you can't put that kind of pressure on yourself, because if you think about it, the only time you've ever gotten better, the only time that you've actually been able to grow is when you had immense pressure on you. You're in senior in high school, you're trying to figure out how to get into college, you're writing essays, you're trying to get your SAT scores up, you're getting reference letters, you're under immense pressure. You're going crazy. But think about how focused you are. And you definitely, most kids supersede what they probably should have done, because the ones that focus in and put that kind of pressure on themselves, most of the time at least get what they want. So it's the same kind of thing you need to do as a coach and as a player if you want to be really extraordinary. You have to put immense pressure on yourself and get used to it on a day-to-day basis. So when my player comes to me in the middle of an intense practice and says, Coach, I'm really feeling pressed right now. Good. Because you're made for that. That's what you're made for. You're made to put it. You think Kobe, Michael, did he look like he was sweating, dropping all those buckets in the end of the games? No, he was made for it. He had a mindset, I'm made for this. I prepared for this. And that's what you have to stress with your team, is that the more I bust your chops, the more I push you, and the more I get into even a higher level that stresses you out, makes you uncomfortable, the better it is for you. Because that's the only way you can grow and get better.
Next question I want to ask you, just to kind of piggyback off of what you just said about executing. What kind of tactics or strategies have you kind of executed on, just to give people a macro example of it?
The same thing that we're talking about. Like, I'm 60. I'm doing the same thing I was doing when I was 22. I'm hostile. I'm trying to figure out every last person that can help me. And I tell young kids all the time, it's like, man, there's not a time for you to start discriminating. Oh, I don't want to ask my mom. Oh, I don't want to ask my dad. Oh, I don't want to ask my uncle. Shit. You ask anybody and everybody that can help you win. That's like going on the court and you got this guy who's open underneath the basket. You're like, oh, I'm not going to pass to him. Hey, you got your mom under the basket. You pass it to her. it's like at the end of the day, I'm hostile. I'm trying to figure out every which way. And my mind is going a million miles an hour every day, all day, trying to figure out that one thing that maybe I have forgotten or didn't think of. So I asked Derek Jeter, I said, Derek, what's going on in your mind in the middle of a game? He says, Brandon, between every pitch, I'm thinking about 500 different things. I said, between every pitch? He goes, yeah. I mean, I'm playing this game for 30 years, 40 years. Every pitch, I'm thinking about the runner. I'm thinking about the batter. I'm thinking about where the pitcher's pitching. Is he throwing curves, fastballs? I'm trying to take note of what pitch he's throwing. How fast is the guy on first base? Does this guy tend to hit it in shorts? Does he tend to hit it in center? Does he tend to hit a ground ball? I'm thinking of every combination of what could possibly happen. And if the ball gets hit to my right, left, right at me, I'm thinking of all those scenarios. So when it does happen, I'm prepared. And that's the same thing I say to you. It's like I'm thinking of every possibility of what it takes to get my brand out there on a minute-to-minute, day-to-day basis with as many people as I can. I think, when people ask me about Collectiblexchange, like, I'm into every little thing, because you have to really qualify it. If you imagine like being successful in business is like going into the jungle, right? And the goal of the business is to come out of the jungle. So I'm on the outside of the jungle. Honestly, what I'm trying to find is I'm trying to develop is I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. I'm trying to find, I know there's going to be birds. I know there's going to be lions, tigers, all kinds of shit in this jungle. Poison ivy. I need to go in this jungle with as many of these experts as I can to get me through the jungle. So I'm going to get a plant and tree expert to avoid me from any kind of tree disease or plant disease. I'm going to get somebody who knows how to fight and detect that there's a lion or a tiger. I'm going to get somebody who knows how to navigate with a map and knows how to get me through the jungle. And that's how you have to look at the team game. Is like you have to look at the team as about to enter into a jungle. You can't get through there yourself. You can't get to the other side of the jungle on your own. So what role are you going to play? What are you good at? And what role are your teammates going to play? So you each play a vital role in helping ultimately your team get through the jungle. And that's what a season and that's what a business year is about. It's about predicting what you're about to get into when you get into the jungle and have the right people around you, knowing their roles, so they can protect you through hostile and incredibly adverse environments. But you have those experts and those people who know how to deal with that stuff. So you cruise through the jungle and you win the game. You know who the rebounders are. You know who the people that are supposed to shoot. You know who the lockdown defenders are. And those are the people that help you get your team get through the jungle. You convince your team about their roles and what they could do to help your team get through the jungle. Then you don't have kids dribbling when they're not supposed to be dribbling. Kids not boxing out that are supposed to be getting rebounds and everything else. Because they know that if they don't do that, you die and you lose, period. Best way I could put it.
Like on the well-known term in basketball is KYP, know your personnel, like whether it's who you're playing against or who you're playing with. That's the most important information you can have in the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely a super interesting point. I've always thought that the most dangerous thing isn't really someone that's lazy and doesn't work hard, but more so someone that genuinely believes they're working hard, but in reality, they're not taking any steps to better themselves and are in fact lazy. It's the guy that posts #NoDaysOff on Instagram thinking, okay, I went to one of the 2 mandatory quarantine practices this week. I kind of broke a sweat. And you know what? Because I did that, I'm going to have a breakout season next year. What's your kind of thoughts on how it's best to avoid that and kind of realize that, okay, maybe I'm not taking the right steps and I'm not putting the effort I think I'm putting in?
Basically thinks he's doing more than what he's actually doing. He's not really living up to the expectations that the team nor the coach needs him to. And I think it's not what you expect, it's what you inspect. And it's really important to start channeling and measuring what that player is doing so you can actually see if it's enough. But you also got to remember there are some players that are pint and there's some players that are quart. Not every player is Kobe, and nor can they be, nor do they want to be. So to try expecting a player to be a Kobe when they're really not a Kobe is a mistake in the coaching and management. Not every player is willing to give you its all. I mean, or sometimes a player's all is not what you consider to be enough. And you either have to learn with it or you got to cut. I always tell kids the difference between 99% effort and 100% is 100%. So it's really important to keep that in mind. And, listen, there's always a habit of a lot of players and a lot of employees that think that they're better than they are. It's not an easy thing.
Just to wrap up, onto some more fun questions. When was the moment you really realized you were in the right place in the sports industry? Not so much I made it moment, but more so like, you know what, this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm passionate about, and what I want to continue to do.
I definitely had a moment of confidence, I think, in the late 90s when things started popping. And I started, some of the things I was working on, which took a while, by the way. I always say Rome isn't built in a day, but they were working on it every day. I think, I think in the late 90s, it was like, so maybe I got something here. I remember my wife walking in my office saying, she's not a big sports fan, but saying, I think you got something here. And that was a really big vote of confidence. I mean, there's a few things along the way. I think when you go through different transitions, people have a tendency of overplaying the negative and underplaying the positive. Something bad happens, you're still talking about it 10 years later. Something positive happens, we kind of minimize it. And you got to really give yourself a break. I mean, you got to really kind of play both of those sides. And I don't think you should get caught up in either one of those things. I think you recognize what happened, learn from it, move on, win or lose. So I think for me, the late 90s was a really interesting time for me because I was just in uncharted waters, and I was starting to get into a business that was way bigger than anything I'd ever run. And it was beginning to look like this was going to be something a lot bigger than anything I anticipated. And I was excited. I mean, I had no idea what the hell I was doing, but it was exciting. And, you figure it out. That's what entrepreneurs that are committed and convicted do. You figure it out. And some things work and some things don't. But this happened to work out pretty good for me.
So just one last question before we wrap up. Who are kind of your favorite players, both whether they're in the league today or all time, where we just can't miss TV for you?
I mean, I love Diana Taurasi. I love Clyde Frazier. Always was an Earl Monroe fan. Listen, you got to not love – how can you not love Michael Jordan? There's no question about that. Love Muhammad Ali. Love Mariano Rivera. Love Bubba Smith, who is probably somebody that most people watching don't know, but he was a 6'7", 6'8" defensive end for Michigan State. Went to a few Super Bowls and was one of the first black defensive players that started at Michigan State. And he was in all the police academies. He taught me a lot. I have a great relationship with him. Loved him. Loved Rudy, a guy that I've worked with a lot. You watch the movie Rudy. I got to work with him a lot.
I'm a huge fan of Rudy, and that's one of my favorite movies in terms of like the underdog story.
I have a great relationship with Rudy. I'm just working on his website as we speak.
That was a big inspiration for me. I started playing basketball really late. I was cut from the freshman, JV, and varsity teams, and then ended up making it as a senior. That's the kind of moment and feeling I want to have.
Exactly.
You brought up Michael Jordan, how much you loved him. What were your thoughts on the Jordan documentary?
It was good. It was generous of him, to let people in the inside, not only of the inside of all the stuff that happened, which obviously had that footage, but his commentary about, admitting that he really didn't like certain players, admitting what got him fired up, admitting that, I always talk about the game within the game is so important, even more important than the game. And it was great how he talked about the game within the game he used to play, where people would doubt him and people would start questioning him, and he how he got himself fired up. And I look at it as like he was a guy who understood the importance of being hostile and putting yourself against the wall. Here he is. People are comparing him to other players, and he puts himself against the wall. Like, you believe these people? I have to show them, like, I'm a nothing unless and he creates this whole incredibly, rogue, hostile environment. And that's what you got to do, man. You got to put yourself, because that's when you respond in the biggest way, when you're pushed against the wall. The greatest results happens when you push yourself past comfortability to the point where you're crazy. That's when good stuff happens, man. And I think it was very generous of him. It was good. It was a good inside look about what it takes to be extraordinary. You rarely see, most of the people you read about the extraordinary, the most incredible people in the world, you hear about it way, way too late, where they're just so past their prime, or they're messed up and they're on some kind of drugs, alcohol. Like this was a clean look at this guy, to get the story straight. And I think it's important for people I think it's great for people to strive to be the greatest. I wish more people would strive to be not only good or successful, but to be the best. It's something that I really can relate to and I enjoy. I always want to be the best at what I did. And I have every intention of maintaining what I built so far and going to another level.
The best parts for me by far, all those mentality sequences, especially the last part, I think, of episode 6, when they showed him, he was like, if you don't want to play that way, don't play that way. And they're all jogging up the court and talking about it, just the deep dive into his mentality. That kind of wraps up everything I wanted to ask you. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this and how much I enjoyed it.
My pleasure, man. Keep in touch. Keep in touch. Stay safe. And we'll talk. Hopefully I'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Big Fellas Podcast. Check us out on all major social media platforms at Big Fellas Pod to join the chop up. You can also listen to us on every podcast platform on the planet. Stay tuned for the next episode, Big Fellas.